Are the Samaritans the true Israelites? Every year on Passover, hundreds of people climb to the place where their temple once stood and sacrifice lambs exactly as the Torah describes. They have done this every single year without interruption for thousands of years. And no, I'm not talking about Jerusalem. And I'm not talking about the Jews. I'm talking about the Samaritans. Right now, I'm driving to Mount Gerizim, one of the holiest, most unusual and least known places in Israel. I'm going to meet a Samaritan priest and a Samaritan woman, and we are also going to talk about Jews, Jesus, history, Tchina, and blood. How are all these things connected? You will understand soon enough. So come along with me in my brand new Mazda. Well, it was new back in 2002, and let's head to Mount Gerizim. I'm standing right now on Mount Gerizim. At the very top is the holiest site for the Samaritans, which is also an archaeological site. And right next to it is a Samaritans village. In the Bible, it is known as the Mountain of Blessing. It rises 880 meters above sea level, with the city of Nablus, biblical Shechem, spread out below it. But the real importance of this mountain is not the view. Even before the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, Moses gave them a clear instructions in the book of Deuteronomy. You shall set the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. Picture the scene, two large mountains standing across from each other. On one side is Mount Gerizim, representing blessing. On the other is Mount Ebal, dry and rocky, representing the curse. And between them, in the valley, is the city of Shechem. When Joshua led the Israelites into the land, they carried out this ceremony. Half of the tribes stood on Mount Gerizim and answered Amen to the blessings, peace, success, and prosperity. The other half stood on Mount Ebal and answered Amen to the curse that would come if the people abandoned the laws of the Torah. This was a defining moment. Mount Gerizim became the mountain of blessing. But the biblical story of the area starts even earlier. Shechem and the mountains around it were Abraham's first stop after he entered the land of Canaan. At Alon Moreh, he built an altar. This is also where Jacob later bought a piece of land and built an altar of his own. And that is important. Long before Jerusalem became the capital of the kingdom of Judea under King David and King Solomon, Shechem and the surrounding mountains were at the center of the biblical story. This was the land of the patriarch, the tribes, and the early settlements of the Israelites. For the Samaritans, this is not just an important biblical site. It is the holiest place on earth. And to understand why, you first need to ask a very interesting question. What exactly is the Bible? Does the word Bible means only the 5 books of Moses? Does it also include the prophets and the rest of the Hebrew Bible? What about the Talmud and the later rabbinic writings? Does it also include the New Testament? This question matters here because the Samaritans accept only the 5 books of Moses as sacred scripture. They do not accept the prophets, the rest of the Hebrew Bible, the New Testament, or the Talmud as religious authority. This is also why they do not believe that Jerusalem is the place God chose for his temple. Jerusalem is never mentioned by name in the 5 books of Moses. Mount Gerizim, however, is mentioned directly. So before we look at what the Samaritans believed, how they worship, and why they still sacrifice lambs on Passover, we first need to answer a more basic question. Who are the Samaritans? There are 2 very different answers to that question. The Samaritan version and the Jewish version. Let's start with the Samaritan version. According to their version, they are the direct descendants of the ancient Israelites who never left this land. In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire conquered the kingdom of Israel and exiled much of its population. But according to the Samaritans, not everyone was taken away. Their ancestors remained here, on and around Mount Gerizim, where they had always worshipped God. According to Samaritan tradition, the Great Speak did not begin with the Assyrian conquest. It happened much earlier, when Eli the priest moved the tabernacle from Mount Gerizim to Shiloh. In their view, that move went against God's command. The Samaritan Torah is remarkably similar to the Jewish Torah. Most of the differences are minor, but one difference changes everything. In the Samaritan version of the Ten Commandments, there is an additional commandment instructing the Israelites to build an altar on Mount Gerizim. From the Samaritan perspective, this mountain, not Jerusalem, is the place God chose for his sanctuary. Think about the biblical story. Abraham builds here an altar near Shechem. Jacob buys land here and builds another altar. The Israelites proclaim the blessing here when they enter the promised land. To the Samaritans, all of these events point to the same conclusion. Mount Gerizim has always been the spiritual center of Israel. And this is where their name comes from, Samaritans, or in Hebrew, Shomronim, from the word shomer, which means to keep or to guard. In their view, they are the ones keeping and preserving the true original Torah. The Samaritans' writing preserves the ancient Hebrew script. The brother of the high priest agreed to let me film him reciting the Shema Israel, the most fundamental prayer of, let's say, the Israelites in their language.
هيك الشمرونين من بتقيم شمع إسرائيل. شيما إسرائيل شيما إلوين شمعاد وإبطاء شيما إلوك أفكل بابك وفكل لفشك وفكل ميقودك ويؤدي بارم إلا إيشر آناكي أمسابك أيما اللي بابك وشلل كما الباري في دبرتا بمنا أفشفتك ببيت أبريكتك بديرك بشكابك وبقومك وكاشرت مالوت اليدك وايو الكاتافت بالإينك وكاتبت مال مازوزك بتك وبشارك.
As an Israeli and a Jew, walking around here feels really strange. It's almost like being in a border zone between Jews and non-Jews, and between Israel and non-Israel. You hear both Hebrew and Arabic spoken here. I cannot read the script on the houses, but I can tell those are ancient letters close to Hebrew. Some of the women look Muslim, while others are in Western clothing. There are a lot of menorahs that remind me of synagogues, but the style is like a little bit different. Anyway, this was the Samaritan tradition. The Jews have a completely different version. According to the Bible, after conquering the kingdom of Israel, the Assyrians deported much of the Israelite population and replaced them with people from other parts of the empire. This was a common strategy in the ancient world. Moving population made rebellious much less likely. One of these groups came from a city called Kuta. Today it is in Iraq. Over time, these settlers adopted many Israelite beliefs and began worshipping the God of Israel. But the Jews never regarded them as true Israelites. Instead, they became known as the Samaritans, and this is where their name comes from, Shomronim, simply because they came from Samaria, which in Hebrew is called Shomron. But wait, how does this make sense? Just a second ago I said the name Samaritans come from the word to keep, to guard. Well, in Hebrew, every word is built on a three-letter root. And as it happens, both the name Shomron, Samaria, and the verb lishmor, to keep, to guard, shares the exact same root letters. Whether you accept the Samaritan versions or the Jewish version, one fact is undeniable. The disagreement between Jews and Samaritans wasn't simply an argument over history. It wasn't even just about identity. It comes down to one fundamental question. Where did God choose to be worshipped? The Jewish answer was Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where Solomon would later build the temple. The Samaritan answer was Mount Gerizim. That disagreement shaped the history of both peoples for centuries. Sometime after the return from the Babylonian exile, the Samaritans built their own temple right here on Mount Gerizim. This wasn't just a small local shrine. It became the religious heart of the Samaritan community and served the role for generations. But the temple did not survive. On 111 BC, the Hashmonaim ruler Yochanan Hyrcanus, conquered the area, destroyed the Samaritan temple, and left it in ruins. For the Jewish kingdom, this sent a clear message. There could only be one legitimate temple, and it stood in Jerusalem. The Samaritan temple disappeared. The Samaritan faith did not. And the Samaritans play a central role in the New Testament narrative. In fact, every time they appear in the New Testament, they play a surprisingly positive role. The most famous example, of course, is the story of the Good Samaritan. In Jesus' parable, a man is traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho when he is attacked by robbers, beaten and left on the side of the road. A Jewish priest walks by and he doesn't stop. Then a Levite walks by, he doesn't stop either. Finally, a Samaritan comes along. Despite the deep hostility that existed between Jews and Samaritans at the time, he is the one who helps the injured man. He bandages his wounded, takes him to an inn, and even pays for his care. That's why, to this day, the expression a good Samaritan means someone who helps a stranger in need. The Samaritans appear in another famous story, this time in the Gospel of John. Jesus is traveling from Jerusalem back to Galilee. If you look at the map, the shortest route goes straight through Samaria. But because relationships between Jews and Samaritans were so hostile, many Jews preferred taking a much longer route just to avoid passing through Samaritan territory. Jesus doesn't avoid it. He walks straight through Samaria and stops beside a well at the foot of this mountain. There he asks a Samaritan woman for a drink of water. She is shocked. Not only were Jews and Samaritans deeply divided, but in that culture it was also unusual for a man to speak privately with a woman he didn't know. During their conversation, Jesus tells her he knows about her personal life, that she has had 5 husbands and that the man she's living with now is not her husband. Then he speaks about something far more important. He offers her what he calls living water, a relationship with God that satisfies a person's deepest spiritual thirst. The woman then asks the question that had divided Jews and Samaritans for centuries. Where should people worship God? Here on Mount Gerizim or in Jerusalem? Jesus gives an answer that completely changes the conversation. He says that the day is coming where true worship will no longer depend on a particular mountain or city. Instead, people will worship God in spirit and in truth. For Christians, this is one of the most significant conversations in the New Testament. It also takes place right here at the foot of Mount Gerizim. Ironically, even though the Samaritans are portrayed positively in the New Testament, life became much harder for them after the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. During the Byzantine period, churches were built on Samaritans' holy sites, including one right here on Mount Gerizim. The ruins are still visible today. At that time, the Samaritan population is believed to have reached nearly 500,000 people. Then they revolted against Byzantine rule. The revolt was crushed. Most of the Samaritans' community was killed or dispersed, and their population never recovered. The centuries that followed under Muslim rule brought additional hardships, and by the beginning of the 20th century, only about 150 Samaritans remained. It is remarkable that the community survived at all. Today, the entire Samaritan community is divided between 2 places, here on Mount Gerizim and Hulon, near Tel Aviv. Although it is a tiny community, they continue practicing one biblical commandment that almost no one else still performs: the Passover sacrifice. Every year, on the eve of Passover, the entire Samaritan community gathered on the summit of Mount Gerizim, right here, to carry out Passover sacrifice exactly as it is described in the book of Exodus. For Jews, animal sacrifice came to an end nearly 2,000 years ago when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in Jerusalem. From that point on, prayers replaced sacrifice. For the Samaritans, however, the commandment never ended. Every single year, without interruption, they continue the same ceremony their ancestors believe they had been performing for thousands of years. Everyone in the community dresses in white. The high priest steps on the platform, and then hundreds of voices begin chanting verses from the Torah in ancient Hebrew Aramaic prayer that has been passed down for generations. As the sun sets, the high priest gives the signal, and dozens of lambs are sacrificed at the same moment. The blood is placed on the foreheads of community members and their children, recalling the blood that the Israelites placed on their doorposts in Egypt during the first Passover. But the sacrifice is only the beginning. The lambs are cleaned, salted, and lowered into deep underground ovens that have been heated for hours. The pits are covered with rugs and earth, trapping the intense heat inside while the meat slowly roasted throughout the evening. Around midnight, the lambs are removed and the community gathered to eat them exactly as described in the Torah, with unleavened bread, eating quickly, just as the Israel did on the night of the Exodus. By sunrise, every remaining piece of meat is burned until nothing is left. Personally, I find this fascinating. I made an entire video about the history of sacrifice in Jerusalem. It wasn't one of my most popular videos, but it is still one of my personal favorites, because sacrifices was the very center of almost every ancient civilization. Whether we're talking about child sacrifice to the Molech, Abraham preparing to sacrifice Isaac, the sacrifices in the Jewish temple, or Jesus sacrificing himself on the cross. The idea of sacrifice shaped the religious world at the ancient Middle East. Today, most people think about connecting with God through prayers, meditation, or quiet reflection. But for much of human history, public animal sacrifice was one of the primary ways people expressed their relationship with the divine. That wasn't unique to ancient Israel. Greeks, Romans, and many other civilizations practiced sacrifice as well. The blood of the Passover sacrifice is public. The entire community gathered around it. Everyone witnesses it. Everyone participated in it. But there is another kind of blood discussed throughout the Torah. And among the Samaritans, it is treated in exactly the opposite way. Not publicly, but privately. I'm talking about menstruation. Both Jews and Samaritans read the same verses in the book of Leviticus, stating that a woman during her period is ritually impure, and that whatever she touches, sits on, or lie on also becomes ritually impure. But this is where the two traditions developed very differently. Rabbinic Judaism spent nearly 2,000 years interpreting these laws. As a result, in most Jewish communities today, the practical focus is mainly on physical intimacy between husband and wife rather than complete physical separation. The Samaritans took a different path. They largely continued following the biblical text as it is written. Traditionally, during her period, a Samaritan woman lives separately from the rest of the household. In early generation, many homes had a separate building for this purpose. During that time, she does not prepare food for the family, avoids using shared household items, and does not sit on furniture used by the rest of the family, because according to Samaritans' religious law, those objects also become ritually impure. Most Jewish communities no longer observe these laws in the literal way. The Samaritans still do, because from their perspective, if the Torah gives a commandment, it is not something later generations have the authority to change. What's interesting is that this period also means the husband take over the household responsibilities for the week. Cooking, cleaning, and caring for the family become his responsibility, while his wife is separated and free from daily household life. As a Jew, I find it fascinating to see how two communities, starting with almost the same biblical text, developed in such different directions. Judaism became a religion built around centuries of legal interpretation. A single verse like "do not boil a young goat in its mother's milk" eventually developed into an entire system of dietary laws separating meat and dairy. Yet when it comes to the laws surrounding menstruation, Rabbinic Judaism moved towards a much narrow practical interpretation, while the Samaritans preserved a far more literal reading of the biblical text. I could have made this video entirely about archaeology or history or biblical geography. Every one of those topics could easily fill an hour-long documentary. But I deliberately chose to focus on blood, the blood of sacrifice and the blood of the period, because blood appears everywhere in the Bible. In fact, the word blood appears 360 times in the Hebrew Bible. blood isn't just associated with death, it is also deeply connected to life. A woman's period cycle is part of the process that makes life possible. Throughout the Bible, blood represents life, covenant, purity, sacrifice, forgiveness, and atonement. The Bible isn't just a collection of abstract spiritual ideas, it is grounded in everyday's life, in farming, family, work, birth, death, and the physical world. That's one of the things I find so fascinating about it. Speaking of the physical world, as I was walking through the site, I bumped into a crew working here. When I asked what they were restoring, they told me they were preserving the ancient latrines, which turns out is pretty essential because Jews, Samaritans, Romans, and Christians all need to use the bathroom once in a while. We are heading to the Samaritan Museum, where we will hear their story from someone who grew up in this community. I haven't visited the museum, so I'm curious to hear how they will tell their own history. It may not be exactly the same version as I just shared with you. Can you please tell us what is your name and what can we see here and who are you?
My name is Salwa Cohen. I'm a Samaritan woman, the daughter of the priest Hosni Yefet Cohen, who established the museum before 30 years. Here you can come to the museum and come with us to have a journey throughout the history, to know everything about the Samaritans, the true Israelites, since 3,664 years when they entered the Holy Land, till now, we are still exist on Mount Gerizim and the other half of the community on Holon, near Tel Aviv. We are the smallest community all over the world, and this museum will show you everything about the Samaritans, history, traditions, the holidays, and everything.
And I see here you have 3 passports, like the Jordanian passport, the Palestinian passport, the Israeli passport. How do you see yourself?
Yes, the Samaritan on Mount Gerizim have 3 passports. The Jordanian before 67, King Hussein offered the Samaritans the Jordanian. Palestinian we had it, but we asked to have the Israeli one on 1995 because the half of the community is living in Holon near Tel Aviv and they are handling only the Israeli passport. In order to be in touch with them and to have, we are same community in 2 different places. So to keep in touch with them, we asked to have the Israeli, but we keep also the Palestinian with us because we are living on Mount Gerizim, which is ABC, and this is critical area. So we keep about both nationalities, and also we are respect both nationalities, and we are citizens in both states. Yes,
You have your own calendar.
true. Our calendar, Samaritan calendar, which we calculated since the entrance of the Holy Land 3,664 years ago. It is 12 months throughout all the year based on lunar system. So the first month always will be on late March, 1st April, let's say. First month, we will celebrate the Passover on the night of the 14th day of the first month of the Samaritan calendar, Passover. Then we will celebrate the unleavened bread, which is matzot. All the Samaritan will make special bread made of flour, water, salt, and only without adding any yeast. This is the second holiday. The third holiday will be Shavuot, Pentecost. All the Samaritans go out on the top of Mount Gerizim in order to make the pilgrimage on it. The fourth one is the New Year, Samaritan New Year. In Hebrew we called it Rosh Chodashim. Number 5 will be fasting day Kippur. All the Samaritans should fast 24 hours. Number 6, tabernacle tabernacle Sukkot. All the Samaritans make special sukkah inside our home. And the last one, the 7th one, will be Shmini Atzeret Happy Torah. All the Samaritans gathered all together in the synagogue, and we make special prayers on it. So our calendar is 12 months, but we have also years which called leap year, which will be 13 months, again 1 month extra. So this year we celebrated the Passover the 30th of April, and Jews celebrated the 2nd of April. Why? Because the Samaritan we have leap year, Jews will not have leap year. And this is the differences between us.
And the name of the months are like the,
Say Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi is the first, second, third.
okay, not like the Jewish.
First, second, third. Yes.
Okay. And you say you're a very small community. Do you marry only inside the community, also outside?
We have intermarriage. All the Samaritans marry with the same community, because if we let everyone do what he wants, we will vanish for all the communities outside. So we have one problem. Before 100 years nearly, the Kohen Gadol at that time approved for the men to marry from outside the community, Jews or Muslim or Christian, but she must be a Samaritan. She must convert to be a Samaritan. Why? In order to raise her children according to our beliefs. This is the idea. So because of that, all the women that we, let's say, take from outside, they are now Samaritans, or the children are Samaritans. Even the children is for father in our religion. It's not for mother, but she must raise her children according to our beliefs.
And what about women? Do they like follow exactly the rules as it says in the Bible?
True. Everything written in the 5 books of Moses, we are following them. Yani, let's say maybe, I don't want to say 100%, let's say 90%. Because we need to follow everything written in the 5 books. The woman, when let's say a girl getting her monthly period for the first time, even if she's 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, till she's 50 years old, she must save and keep about the purity and the, let's say, to be pure enough and not touch anything inside the home, because we believe Samaritan home is a holy thing, and I'm not pure enough to touch anything. So I have my own bed, my own bathroom, my own materials to deal with. My food will come to me, and I'm not doing anything inside home. I'm only sitting aside inside home, but not touch anything inside home. So I can work outside. I can go for a picnic or to do whatever I want. But inside home, I need to be aside. I cannot touch my husband, my children, my anything in home. This 7 days like a holiday for me. So who will be able to help me to do food, to make food, or to cook, or to make housework? My husband, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law. This is strengthen the relationship between the community. So you can see that this 7 days I'm offline. And after that, we don't have mikveh, but we need to cover our body inside the bathroom and have a shower after that. So I'm getting my 7 days over. And if I'm giving birth to baby boy, as it's written in the Old Testament, it is 40 days aside. Only my mission is to taking care of my baby. And if I am having the baby girl, I need to have 80 days aside, taking care just of my baby. After that, I can do anything I want. But this is because we believe that the man or the human, Samaritan human being is sacred, and everything related to us is sacred. So I cannot touch anything inside home when I'm at my period.
Okay. And then the family brings food to you?
Yes, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my husband also. This is let's all the community and the men exactly to appreciate his wife. The man is appreciating his wife when she is 7 days aside. She taking a rest for this, let's say, sick time or period or monthly period. So he appreciate his woman when he saw that she is doing everything, and this 7 days is for her.
Very interesting. Just for people who want to come here, so this museum is open every day, closed on Saturday, and people could come not only in groups, but also individuals can come here.
Here in our museum, Samaritan Museum, which is on Mount Gerizim, West Bank, near Nablus city, we have, thanks God, safe area. Everyone can come here to see the history of the Samaritans and know everything about the Samaritans. We are here to guide you to know everything. Even you are alone and you are with group, you are welcome to be here to know about the Samaritans from Sunday to Friday, 8:30 to 4 p.m. And everyone wants to come lately, they can arrange with us about his journey.
אוקיי, טוב, תודה רבה.
Thank you.
When I told my friends I was driving to Har Bracha today, they didn't ask if I was visiting the Samaritans or Mount Gerizim. Not one of them did. Every single person asked me exactly the same question. Are you bringing back tahini? The Samaritans own one of Israel's most famous tahini factories, and many Israelis swear it is the best tahini in the country. Since tahina is practically a national food here and an essential part of every proper bowl of hummus, people have very strong opinions which brand is the best. So now I will head to their factory. This video was about the Samaritans, but along the way we ended up talking about the Bible, sacrifice, purity, blood, and even tahini. And I guess that's what I love most about traveling through Israel. You set out to learn about one tiny community of just like 800 people, and somehow you end up asking much bigger questions about history, faith, identity, and what it really means to preserve a tradition for thousands of years. I hope this video didn't just teach you something new, I hope it also gave you something to think about. That's exactly what I try to do on my tours here in Israel. And before we finish, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone supporting this channel on Ko-fi. Your support is what makes videos like this possible. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one. Yalla, bye.